at the same time, you're like, look, if I wanted to buy, Curaleaf at 18, I still thought that it was a good value up there because the multiple is nowhere near where it needed to be. Now they're doing double the revenue from when they were $18. Why am I going to like it less at 9? That's all.
Well, you said the words Curaleaf and Boris hopped in here. So, hey, Boris, can you chat?
We always catch Boris off guard. I think Boris only wants to do our spaces.
Let's see if we can get him connected.
Yeah, sorry, Toby, I just landed. I just figured this thing out. I'm on.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, yeah, thanks for joining. I messaged you earlier. Yeah, thanks for joining. Where are you, by the way?
Yeah.
Can you say?
I just arrived in Florida. I spent the week out in California and Arizona, doing some stuff with our assets out there.
Got it. How's it looking out there in California?
Well, California it's what I said on the call. California is going through the same cycle that Oregon and Colorado went through, where, 2 years after adult use has passed, you get this period of, there's too much product on the market. There's not enough enforcement. And so you do get some weakness. And I think that California is going to go probably through 12 months right now of, weakness in the marketplace. But we launched our Click product. We had a big event in LA. We had a big blitz through the whole state. Really great reception on Click. So we're super happy. But, I think overall, I think everybody needs to understand that, these individual states, they do go through a cycle. And the cycle is very simple, right? You have a very strong medical market. It goes into adult use. You get 2 years of very strong growth and expansion of margins. And then you get about a 12 to 18 month period of what I would call adult use hangover. And then, the market starts to come back as the weaker players are squeezed out and the larger players consolidate and the illegal operators also shut down because there's not enough margin to keep them operating. And then those markets come back. We saw that happen in Colorado. We saw that happen in Oregon. I mean, I remember in Oregon, a pound of cannabis was sold for $45 at the same time we were selling a pound of cannabis in Massachusetts for $4,000. And that's the structure of the U.S. market, right? Because you can't move between borders. So I personally think that the California is going to have a rough ride here for 12 to 18 months. But it's a natural process. It's the biggest market in the country. And you can't, like my view and Curaleaf's view is you cannot not be in California. If you're building national brands, if you want to learn how to compete in a competitive market, you got to win in California. And, that's why I spent the time out there, because we've got some plans, as I outlined on our earnings call. We'll be outlining our California strategy to the market in a couple of weeks. And we're very, very focused on it. And we want to win in California. And we want to, we see this downturn in California as a massive opportunity for Curaleaf.
Yeah, actually, Boris. So I actually was at one of your Vegas stores and met Mark Russ. Yeah, super nice guy, and he gave me like this goodie package. So I actually have the Click. I haven't tried it yet, and I got a bunch of gummies. Haven't tried them yet, but I'm a select user, so I will get around to it eventually.
Well, try the Click and definitely write me what you think, good or bad. Public, I'm not opposed to that. But we've gotten a great reception. I'm a user. I love Click. I've always got it in my pocket. We worked 3 years to create that device. And I can tell you why I know it's good. Stizzy's at war with us in California because they're so nervous about Click.
Stizzy's the number one brand in California.
Yeah, we'll see for how much longer.
I guess a question for you. I mean, look, obviously I chat with a lot of people about the company. I guess like maybe a little bit more color on your growth. I think with Curaleaf, a lot of it usually comes down to the growth versus margin debate. I mean, you hear it all the time. I hear it all the time. Maybe you could just kind of, again, clarify like your stance on that. And, I think people are just sometimes kind of confused because you guys are obviously the largest company by revenue in the space. But people look at your margins and some people kind of nitpick on it. So I want to give you this opportunity to just kind of, again, like reiterate your philosophy and the company's growth strategy around that?
Listen, Toby, I'm not here to win popularity contests. To be honest, I don't give a shit what anybody else thinks. I know what I need to do. I've built many companies in the past. My focus is on growth. This is a time to grow. And again, I hate bringing up the analogy, but somewhere I saw on Twitter the other day after the earnings, somebody put up a earnings call that Bezos had in 2010, where everybody was slaughtering him for missing. And then he said, okay, guys, you want me to show you how much money I can make? He stopped investing for 2 quarters, reported a $5 billion net income, got on the earnings call. He goes, you happy? Everybody's like, yeah, we're happy. He went right back to investing and said, okay, so I showed you what I can do, right? I can slow down growth tomorrow, and I can show the biggest numbers in the market. And here, let me just put things into perspective for everybody. Overlay GTI's footprint on Curaleaf's. For all the states that GTI is in and Curaleaf are together. So take out all the other states of Curaleaf and just overlay that. We have exactly the same margin profile, dollar for dollar, the same margin profile. Now overlay Colorado, California, Michigan, Oregon, Europe, the biggest TAM, in the world. Europe and California, the biggest market, Colorado, the biggest market. And that's where these are brand new markets for Curaleaf, right? We've only been in these markets for less than a year. So we are building those markets. It takes time, but we're going to not only build them, but we're going to win in these markets. And how can you build national brands if you're not in California? How can you build national brands if you're not in Colorado? Or Michigan. These are the biggest states in the country as far as cannabis use and cannabis revenue. And so this is where we decided to go into these highly competitive markets and prove to the market that we can win. But you can't do that in 6 months, not in cannabis. It takes time to build the margin. So our margin on a like-for-like basis is as good, if not better, than anybody else's. And look at our cash flow. We generate $53 million in cash in the third quarter. Nobody did that. We're going to generate more in the fourth quarter. Next year is going to be a massive cash flow generative year. We're refinancing our giant debt facility right now. We'll be announcing that by Christmas, and everybody's going to be shocked on the terms. I can tell you right now that things are going very well at Curaleaf. I'm not worried about it. I'm very focused on growth. And, if people want to bail and they want to play the faire du jour, what everybody wants today, let them do it. I don't care. But all I care about is the fact that I'm growing the biggest cannabis company in the world. I'm growing the biggest brands in the world. You're going to see a lot of activity from us over the next 4 weeks. In the marketplaces. We have a strategy. We're not looking to our sides. We're not looking at what our competition is doing. We're looking at what we're doing. As a leader, you don't look back, you look forward. And that's what Curaleaf does every day. We look forward, we don't look back. So I'm not interested in what the other guys are doing, but I do have to outline to the market, we have a different strategy. It's fundamentally a different strategy. And we have more cash than we know what the hell to do with. And we're growing at a very fast pace. Yes, there was a third quarter result. And by the way, I want everyone to know who's the company that called that in May of this last quarter. When everybody was saying, we don't understand, Boris, why you're talking about a slowdown. The reason we saw it before anybody else is because we have the largest footprint and the deepest penetration in the country. And so we saw that slowdown last May. We went public. We said to everybody the quarter was going to be slow. And by the way, if you look at organic growth, I think Curaleaf, I don't know exactly, but I think Curaleaf produced the highest organic growth rate in quarter 3. All the other companies had M&A close in the quarter. We're the only people that didn't have any M&A in the third quarter. And so we produced a 1.6% sequential growth rate. If you look, I may be mistaken, but I think that my analyst sent me the analysis while I was on the plane, and we're the only people that produced organic growth in that quarter. So, I mean, we're not, listen, and I think all the companies are great. I'm a big fan of GTI. I'm a big fan of Cresco, Verano, Trulieve. I think they're all great companies. But we at Curaleaf have a different strategy. It's fundamentally different. And so if you don't like our strategy, don't invest in our company. But we have a growth strategy. That's where we sit.
I've always said that it's kind of great that the companies all have slightly different strategies because, you can build a portfolio around them. And exactly. I think most institutions aren't, especially, and I talk to institutions. I know you obviously talk to more institutions than I do. But if they're believers in the space, once they onboard, they're not just going to buy one, right? They're going to build a small portfolio. So I actually think it's great
So let me tell you what an $86 billion AUM fund told me the other day, right after our earnings call. He said, Boris, why are you producing $53 million in free cash? You need to be spending it now. He goes, I don't want to see any cash in your balance sheet except for safety cash. He goes, I want you to spend it and I want you to grow. And by the way, that's what the big funds want. The problem in the analyst pool, you got to understand why, and I think this is an absolute mistake by the analysts in the sector. The analysts in the cannabis sector, firstly, are all tier 2, if not 3, maybe even 4 analysts. You don't have any top 1 analyst. The only one is, I think, that has 5 stars is the Needham analyst. But I think that this whole model that's been built around short-term, cash flow and EBITDA margin is built around the fact that they were worried in 2019 and 20 that these companies could not raise cash. And so what they did was they said to them, we need to focus on cash flow because we need to know that these companies can produce enough cash to survive the downturn. Well, guess what? We're out of that period of time now. There is no risk to these companies on a cash flow basis. Every one of the top 5 MSOs could reduce growth tomorrow in CapEx for a quarter or two and generate massive amounts of cash flow. I mean, Curaleaf spends $200 million a year on CapEx. Could you imagine if I slowed that down a little bit? If I slowed that by half, there's $100 million of free cash. Can you imagine if I take my financing rate from 13%, which is was the cheapest when we did it 2 years ago, and do it at 7 to 8% on $350 million? You imagine what that does to your cash flow. So there's plenty of ability to generate cash. We can reduce our inventories, but I grew my inventories dramatically for New Jersey Rec. I think it's the prudent thing to do. That's what you do when you're a growth company. You build inventory going into an event like New Jersey Rec or New York Rec. So these are the things that we're doing, and we think it's the right thing to do. I think the analysts are very short-sighted. I think they need to change their thesis because their thesis is built around an old situation that we had in 2019, 2020, where they were worried that these companies would run out of cash. Nobody's running out of cash for the top 5 companies right now. It's not. They've all built very solid businesses. So I think that thesis needs to change, and everybody needs to refocus on growth. But if they don't want to, I'm happy to do it for you.
I'm trying to get that. I talk to a lot of analysts, and I try to echo that message as well. Let me ask you, because I don't know how much time you have, so I just want to ask you, I guess my most important question is obviously, there's obviously a disconnect between fundamentals and the valuations of the sector, and of course your stock as well. And there's also a very big disconnect between the credit markets and the equity markets. And that's obviously driven by obviously most investors cannot invest on the equity side. And these stocks move on sentiment and perceptions on what's going to happen in DC. So I started off this chat, and you weren't on here, but I started off saying, look, the tier 1s are cashed up. Regardless of what happens at the federal level, they're strong. So it's more of a waiting game, right? It's more of a waiting game. Like the tier 1s, none of them need to raise equity capital here. So just big picture question, how are you planning your business in light of what's going on in DC? And I guess what people want to hear is regardless of what happens in DC, regardless of how long it takes, your growth plans are still intact. It doesn't really change your strategy or your ability to create shareholder value.
Yeah, listen, we obviously we built this company fully understanding what's going on in Washington D.C. and not expecting anything to happen. But I just want to say one thing. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to work on getting something to happen. It's important for it to happen. And my biggest criticism of my colleagues in the MSO space is that nobody's doing fucking anything to get safe passed. And I don't have a problem voicing that because that's my opinion. I think they're doing nothing. And, Curaleaf, with a couple of other players, mainly Canadian operators, and maybe 1 or 2 U.S. second-tier MSOs are the only people working on this. And I think it's short-sighted. I think you can't keep the moat around for very long. The moat's going to come down. You got to compete. And I'm not sure why they're so all afraid of competition. Competition's a good thing. It forces us to be better companies, to produce better products, to market our products better, and to accelerate our innovation. And this whole concept of keeping this moat around, I think, is very short-sighted, and it's wrong. Now, we operate within that mode as well. We have no problem. We're building our company. We fully understand, what we're facing with now. But I'm thinking forward, and that's another reason why Curaleaf's margins sometimes look different, because you'll hear about this over the next couple of month or two. We're building a company that's going to have to compete against Procter & Gamble, against Anheuser-Busch, against Heineken, against all of these companies. And for that, I need to prepare and invest now, because it's too fucking late to do it when we get that legalization. You have to do it now, just like Europe. Everybody on the MSO gang, everybody criticized me for Europe. Well, by the way, I don't know if everybody knows what's going on. And, Germany is at 80 million. It's the third largest economy in the world. And it's 80 million people, and it's about to go adult use. And the way Germany goes, Europe goes. Everybody knows that they're the lead up in Europe. That's a $260 billion market in Europe. Okay? So, frankly, I don't know which market is going to be more interesting over the next 3 years, the U.S. or Europe. And everybody criticized me for that. Everybody said, he's going in too early. And by the way, did I know that Germany was going to go this year? Absolutely not. Was I surprised? I was surprised. But that could happen in the U.S. tomorrow. They could wake up tomorrow because of the Republican pressure on the Democrats and say, we got to get this. And I think this is what's going to happen. Next year, there's going to be a race to get legislation passed on cannabis. Not the Republicans nor the Democrats are going to want to go into the midterms without having done something. So they're going to be racing to get legislation passed. And they could get more aggressive than we all think. And if that happens, and all of a sudden interstate happens, then what are all these MSOs going to do if they're not ready for that? You have to be ready for all eventualities. You got to spend money today on that. And that's what I did in Europe. And now it takes years to replicate what we have in Europe. To be able to sell cannabis in Germany, you have to have EU GMP certification. You've got to have novel food certification. You got to have local German certification. These things take years, not days, years to get. And we're now positioned with all of that to be able to do it. And we did this on purpose because we knew we were spending money early. But, we financed it by selling 30% of our European business to a big sovereign wealth fund. They bought it for $130 million. They're now happy with this decision. We're happy with this decision. Yes, will it take about a year and a half to get to rec in Germany? It will. But it takes a very long time to position yourself. We'll be completely ready on the ground to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. And that opportunity will be massive. I mean, it's literally the third largest. I think it's tied with Japan for the third largest economy in the world. So, this is a huge opportunity, very high use. And for sure, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, they'll all fall behind it. We're the first company to get the right to import into Italy through the Italian military. Curaleaf is the first company to get that licensing. So this is what we're doing. We're doing it quietly. We're working there with the authorities. We believe it's a huge opportunity. We think it's a bigger opportunity potentially in the short term than even the United States, given what the decision Germany just made. So you have to invest in front. And I think this could happen in the U.S. And if it happens in the U.S., obviously the U.S. will be a much bigger opportunity short term. But this could happen next year in the U.S. We could get, a much more comprehensive piece of legislation as these guys start fighting it out for the midterms. The Democrats are obviously not in a good position right now for the midterm elections. They're going to want to get a run on the board. The Republicans, particularly the moderate part of the party, the Republican Party, wants to be in front on cannabis. So we're going to get we could get a very comprehensive piece of legislation. And if we get that, who's going to be ready for it? I hope we're all ready for it, but I can tell you who will definitely be ready for it is Curaleaf.
Yeah, I would imagine the international piece is, if I'm an institutional investor, that's a big thing to me, right? Like I can kind of see it in your multiple. The reason you guys, your stock's cheap, the whole sector's cheap, but you guys do trade at a premium multiple. I would imagine, and that's where I always point out the institution versus kind of the Twitter talk is institutions, obviously the few that can buy your stock are more favorable on your stock than Twitter is because, institutions think growth. They can look forward. They're thinking growth. They're not looking at trailing margins, right? And they're looking at optionality. Europe it's more than just optionality, but I guess how important are things like that to the institutions like Europe?
I can tell you, listen, we have a couple of very large institutional holders in Curaleaf stock. some of the biggest names in the U.S. that found a way to get in. And I can tell you, my calls with them after my earnings call had nothing to do with what everybody wrote on Twitter. It was Boris, pedal to the metal. Keep going, keep building out. We want Europe. We want to see your West Coast strategy. We want to see you grow. And the guy, and I told you, 86 billion AUM fund told me, I don't want to see spare cash in your balance sheet. I want you investing and growing.
Yeah. How are what inning do you think we are in as far as institutional onboarding? And is it correct to assume that the vast majority of that has to wait until uplisting?
So listen, I got a very interesting call today from one of my bankers who said to me, Boris, we're just amazed at the type of investor that's looking at your bond deal. I can't say more than that. But I think that the institutional clients are going to be, institutional investors are going to be quite shocked to see the type of investor that's going to buy this. I hope it helps the whole industry. I was trying to log on when you were speaking about this, and I was listening in on my son's phone, and you were dead right on one thing, and that is that it's an anomaly where you have major long-only institutions buying debt. Debt costs in 2 years have halved, at least for Curaleaf, and which is just amazing, right? Just shows you the quality of the business. I mean, somebody, I think it was Jason, said that when we went public that year in 2018, we did $77 million in revenue. We're going to do in 3 years, we're going to do over $1.2 billion in revenue this year, and that's just massive growth. And I think that the institutions are starting to see that, and they're starting to invest. But it is an amazing thing, and it's strictly a plumbing thing. And, I'm not helping myself by saying this, but we have to fix the plumbing. The plumbing is that the institutional investors cannot find custodians. It's as simple as that. There's no question in my mind that they all want to invest in the sector. They all want to be there. They're all doing work. The biggest problem is finding a prime broker and a custodian that will do their business. And, these banks that have been pulling out, I've seen this before. Banks are very, very slow. Everybody's scratching their head and saying, why are the banks shutting down now? Well, let me tell you why. Because they made that decision 2 years ago, but they're so damn slow in their decision making. And so the other problem is going to be is that, once we get safe, it's going to take them a while to also, allow people to do the business as well. Because it's going to take some time, excuse me, to change. They're because they just shut it down, so now they got to reopen it. So it will take a year to a year and a half. But what they will allow, I think, pretty quickly, if you're a major institutional holder, a big pension fund, or a big long only, and you're already custody with them, they're going to let you add cannabis. But where the problem will be is with the smaller investor. That's going to be a problem, getting the smaller investor on those PB platforms and into those custodies, right? So that's going to take some time for them to come up with policies. But for the big investor, they'll allow it. So you could expect, guys, just take a look at what happened last Friday, right? A Republican bill comes out, the stocks rally almost 30% in 3 days. Yeah. Right? So you can, and that's with no institutional money. So you can just see what's going to happen when we actually get legislation, not rumors of legislation, but real legislation. It's going to be a pretty aggressive rally. There's no question about it. And that's my investor hat on, not my operating hat. It's going to be, and these companies will get overvalued, right? It'll happen, the Tilray type thing will happen where these companies will be worth, for a short period of time, call it a month or two, they'll be worth more than their fair value because there'll be this euphoria in the stocks.
Yeah. Boris, I always have, because, I have this debate with people. So, I'm a shareholder. I have Curaleaf gear.
Thank you. For that.
Well, you don't have to, really, you don't have to thank me. Because, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, back in, it was 2018, you guys bought Select.
Yep.
All right. You remember how much shit you got for buying Select?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I get shit.
Jason. I get shit for everything.
I know. I want to.
I'm a Russian spy. I'm a
Yeah.
communist. You name it. You know what? I've gotten used to this. It doesn't bother me at all. There's only one metric in business that matters,
yes.
And that's how much money you make.
That's right. But if I always say to people, because I always hear, well, Curaleaf doesn't move like this company or that company. I'm like, who gives a shit? You don't want it to move, because at the end of the day, they bought Select for $1 billion. How much do you think Select?
By the way, we bought Select for $300 million.
$300 million. How much do you think it would be worth today if it went public?
Listen, it's the largest brand in the country by stores that it's in, and by the way, a lot of people don't know that, because Select only starting January will start to cooperate with Headset and BDSA and all those, right? So we haven't given our data away. We didn't want to. I think now we're going to, because we're sick and tired of seeing other brands listed as the largest brands, because so we want to prove that. So instead of saying it, we're going to prove it by actually giving data to the data companies. But Select today sold in 21 states. I think we're selling about almost 15 products under the Select brand. Click is another massive innovation. We had Squeeze earlier in the year. Now we have Click. We've got some really, really cool stuff coming out in the first quarter of next year that I think everybody's going to love, and it's going to go. It's products focused on summertime, so they're going to launch into 420. I think they're going to be great, and so we're constantly innovating, we're constantly adding, and Select today you can't replace it. You just can't replace it. It's now sold, and by the way, we needed the footprint before we could distribute that brand nationally. I can tell you, I was in California. Every brand company in California wants to talk to Curaleaf, every single one, because they have no way to distribute nationally without talking to Curaleaf. No.
Right.
But I turn around and say, why do I want to distribute your brand? I just create my own and distribute it through my infrastruration. That's where the value is in owning your brand.
The formulations are where it's at, the building and the creation of those brands.
Exactly.
And this is, I think, a point that a lot of people missed, was that, and to what I was saying before, you guys spent the money in 2018, 2019 for footprints that other MSOs are spending now, like four or five, a lot more, right? So you did the hard work, or the hard part, I should say, of keeping your cash, using your stock, and then turning that, because it's an actual case. And because look, Boris, you got to forgive everybody. In cannabis, they only know bad dilution. They don't understand good dilution. So forgive them. I mean, the EMAC deal.
Listen, every company that sold their company to Curaleaf, every shareholder that sold their company, or entrepreneur that sold their company to Curaleaf and took stock, I can name them all. It's like 15 of them. They all have made a lot more money owning our stock than taking cash.
Of course.
So, we've created massive value in the stock. Obviously, right now we're in a dip. But take a look at the Trike deal. We priced the Trike deal at $17.50 Curaleaf when it was trading at $12. So people that we're buying these companies from are prepared to take our stock at a higher value than where it is trading on that day, because they understand that this current volatility in the stock doesn't represent the value. And the smart investors are prepared to do that because they understand that they're going to make a lot of money with Curaleaf. I mean, I paid for Trike the same price Cresco was going to pay for Trike 2 years before that, and the company's doubled in size. And so, it's just, we also wait. Notice we didn't do any deals except the European deal, during the year, because we didn't like the valuations. The minute the valuations came down, Curaleaf starts doing deals. We're very focused on allocating our capital at the right price. We're not going to overpay for assets. That's a formula for disaster.
Right, and then on the EMAC deal, you sell it and then get the company to cover the cost of the
I bought the company. And then I sold I think it was 30% of the company for $130 million, and I fully funded the growth of the business in Europe.
Perfect. And I actually, after the EMAC deal, I actually made an investment in Germany with the same idea. I was like, okay, if Boris could do, is going to Europe, I'll take a look.
Guys, Germany is going to be a massive market. It's going to be the bellwether for Europe. Everybody needs to get their heads out of, about the U.S. is a great market. Don't get me wrong. I love the United States market. But, I spent 30 years operating out of Europe, and I can tell you one thing. It's a massive, massive market, much more bureaucratic, much harder to deal with. But that's the opportunity. For those that are prepared to invest, those that are prepared to get in early, they're going to get the payday by being in that market. It's a very big cannabis use market. It's just that many people in the U.S. don't know that market at all. And it's going to be very, very large. And this German news today is just, can you imagine if we got the news that we got in Germany today in the U.S.?
No. I know that after that news hit, and some of the news was kind of trickling out, but I've been following the election. And for everybody, Merkel's party has been in power for like 50 years. And they basically have to split governing with the capitalists, and the capitalists all want weed. So yeah, that changed the valuation of the company that I invested in dramatically. And now everybody's just kind of like scrambling. But yeah, you're the biggest company in the world, and the biggest company. I hate when they're the biggest company in the United States. No, you're actually the biggest company in the world. And I think you said this on True Trading Group stream. That basically Europe is where the United States was in 2016. It's like buying Curaleaf in 2016, knowing what Curaleaf would be in like 2021. And now this just speeds up that whole.
And now they're leapfrogging. And now they're starting to leapfrog. This is embarrassing to the U.S., I think.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. Germany, a very conservative country, moving to legalize cannabis, while the United States is still fucking around in D.C. and they can't get anything done. It's embarrassing. It really is. Now, I think it's going to push the U.S. Listen, guys, the stars have never been better aligned for this sector. I want to tell you, everybody, you invest in the top 5 companies, you're all going to do well, because the setup right now is amazing. Now, don't worry about the intraday volatility. Really, just don't worry about it. Now, if you're not, don't buy on leverage. It's a bad thing. In very volatile stocks like this, put your cash, unlevered cash into this and put it away, and you're going to make a lot of money in this sector. There's no question in my mind. Nothing's going to zero. I was just checking in when somebody said zero. That's not going to happen in the sector. It's just not. These numbers are far too great. Can you imagine if 280E goes away, what the numbers are going to look like in these companies?
It'd be silly.
It's just, today we pay an effective tax rate, everybody, of 80%. I want everybody to understand that.
Yeah.
These cannabis companies are paying an effective tax rate of over 80%.
I guess, the crazy thing, Boris, is like you're the largest. I always think of you guys as the largest company in the world. And yet it's like I can buy your stock for under a $10 billion enterprise value. But again, I'm a big fan, but the biggest pushback people usually have is dilution. So it's like you want to do more stuff in Europe. It's like to execute your strategy, how much more dilution, is needed.
Guys, I have never diluted the stock at a value below where I've done the previous deal, ever. So, the reason the Trike deal got done at $17.50 was because I raised money in January at $16.70. And I basically said I won't do a deal below that price. So, guys, we're good at what we do, and we're building value in the company. And we are, and the biggest pressure on all of these stocks is a lot of these companies. Look what's happening to Verano. Verano's a great company. And what's happening there is they chose a different strategy than Curaleaf. They unlocked everybody within 3 months of their IPO. Curaleaf has a 5-year program. Every company we buy unlocks 5% a quarter over a 5-year period. So we're managing the amount of stock that hits the market. That's what we're doing. If you look at the trike deal, it's actually out 3 years. So we're constantly working on making sure that we manage the flow. But I'm not going to stop investing and building the business because of that. I'm just building the structure the right way, the cap structure, to make sure I don't get punished unnecessarily. I think Verano's being punished unnecessarily right now by their shareholders. They're a great business. Their CEO is a great CEO. I have a huge amount of respect for everything that they're doing, and they don't belong anywhere near where they're trading today. And, I don't normally talk about other businesses, but I think it's a travesty, and I'm a shareholder in Verano. I am. I love what they're doing. I love their business, and I just think that they're worth a lot more than they're being got. But it is a plumbing problem, right? They released all of their shareholders. A lot of the companies they bought, people had a cost basis of zero in that stock, right? Because they were founders of those businesses. And so they just want to take their generational wealth off the table. Just imagine people that were making $50 to $100, maybe $200,000 a year, all of a sudden have $20 million of stock. Now, if that stock is 10 million versus 20, do you think they care? No. So if it was 20 and by selling it, they took the stock price down by 30%, they don't care. They're still putting $10 million in it. They never dreamt of that kind of money. Right? So that's the problem right now, but we have to work through this. And we are. I mean, most of the companies, for instance, that Curaleaf bought, were probably 40% through the cycle of these people selling. And once it gets over 50, it's not going to be even noticeable. But but that's what happens is you get people selling the stock. They're selling on a quarterly basis, and that puts pressure on the share price. But it's as big money starts to come in this market, it'll disappear. It won't even be a problem. I personally think the stock is traded very well, given the amount of companies that I bought and the business that I built and the amount of stock that people received. I think the stock is trading very, very well. I'm very pleased with it, actually.
When do you think these companies are going to raise more equity capital? You think, if we get a 50% lift, people are raising again, or?
I don't think the top five need to raise equity capital here. And I'd be surprised. And again, there's good times. Like if you can do a massively accretive deal and you can raise the capital to buy it, you should do it. I mean, again, dilution, as long as it's done for the right reasons, is a good thing. If you're adding value to the business, you should do it. But at the moment, I haven't looked at everybody's numbers, but everybody's pretty well cashed up and everybody's now generating cash. And let's be honest, they can slow their growth, their CapEx down for a quarter or two and leave that cash on the balance sheet if they have to. I mean, all of us are investing, almost $200 million a year in CapEx. So if we slow that CapEx schedule down, that's all money that goes right to the bottom line. So, I don't think anybody has a big CapEx need, a big cash need right now. Not in the top five.
Got it. Hey, my last question is just around SAFE. I mean, obviously, you probably don't spend that much time on Twitter, but Twitter the past 3 weeks has been obsessed with SAFE, like in the NBAA, right? Like, is it passing? Is it not? The last time you spoke, I think you were on record as saying you thought SAFE would pass. I think it was 1Q or 2Q of next year, first half of next year. But just any updated thoughts?
I'm still of that opinion. Listen, the NBAA. Again, I want to again say that Germany was an unexpected surprise, so we could get the same here. But I don't plan my business on unexpected surprises. I look at the worst case scenario always, and I plan to that scenario rather than the best case. If the best case happens, great. But I got to plan for the worst case. I think it's the first half of next year, probably towards the second quarter, not the first quarter. I think the NBAA is a problem because, listen, it's the defense bill. Why the hell is cannabis in the defense bill? So I think the Republicans don't like it. I think Schumer doesn't like it because it's not comprehensive enough for him, the law that's there. Listen, I would take it if we got it. I'm never going to complain about any law in this country that says cannabis, I think is going to open up the floodgates. No matter what's in the law, I think will open up the floodgates. But because there is no federal law today that even says the word cannabis. So I think this would be a positive thing. But I don't think it's going to happen. Like my personal view, my lobbyists are telling me it's 50-50. Joe Barron just spent 3 days in D.C., lobbying on behalf of the industry, on behalf of Curaleaf. And I just want to say that I think we will get it. I think it's going to be a first half next year. I personally prefer that timing, and I'll tell you why. I prefer it because I'd rather make sure we get a good bill than a shitty bill. And right now, if we pass the NDAA, it's a shitty bill. I mean, it's okay. Like I said, I'd take it. But it's not a great bill. It doesn't address all the issues that the industry needs. We need to address tax first and foremost. And then we need to address banking. And then third, we need to address safe harbor language for investors. Those are the three things we need to address, right? And it doesn't have all of those three things in the current draft of it. And I think it would be better if they could get this thing out of the way, sit down, focus on putting together. I think the closer we get to the midterms, the more they're going to want to pass something. So if they pass something now that's halfway, we're not going to get anything next year, right? They won't have time to focus on cannabis next year. But the closer they get and the more noise we make, all of us on Twitter and writing letters and doing that, and we're actually setting up a super PAC now to do this and raise money from the population to do this. The more pressure we start putting on them next year, once we start reaching out and say, we're gonna actually, we're gonna lobby against you, Congressman, or against you, Senator, if you don't focus on cannabis. They are going to start really focusing on this, and they're all going to want to get something done because this is a very popular bipartisan issue in the country. So I'd rather let's give it some time. Let's put pressure on them right in advance of the midterms to get the best possible law that we can get. So that's my thinking on it. Again, I'm very open to other people's ideas. That's just the Boris Jordan.
But I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you're saying. You said you'd rather have a more comprehensive bill. You want it to be you want SAFE to address a little bit more aspects. You mentioned something about safe harbor for investors. Are you talking about uplisting? Because the current kind of consensus view, and I've had meetings with Joe Barron and Joe Lusardi, and I meet with all the other MSOs. And whenever I ask any MSO about safe versus uplisting, I get a wildly different answer between the time lag between safe and uplisting passing. Are you saying that there's potential for safe to potentially include some aspect that would either include uplisting or just massively expedite uplisting?
Yeah, I think that the two Joes probably are trying to taper, expectations because they know Washington very well as well, and they spend a lot of time there. As a matter of fact, last 6 months, they probably spent more time there because I was taking one of my other businesses public. But that's done now in October, and I'm focused on back on Curaleaf. But I personally, my view is that safe banking needs to have three components in it for business, and then a social equity component. The business components are: we need to fix the taxes, we need to fix the banking access, and we need to fix the language for safe harbor to give investors comfort that they can invest in the sector. Now, what that means for uplisting is a different issue. I personally think that there'll be such pressure on the exchanges that they'll do it. They'll uplist, but I don't think it'll happen overnight because I think they all got to go through their committees. They're gonna talk to FinCEN at Treasury. They're gonna get FinCEN's opinion on this issue. So it's going to take some time. However, I do think that the companies will be allowed to uplist in Canada. Listen, Curaleaf's probably done more for that issue in Canada together with the folks at Canaccord than anyone else. We spent 3 years working on uplist in Canada. Now, we have been told right now that they need a little bit more than what they have available to them to allow that because, the banks basically, the banks own the Toronto Exchange and the TSX, and the banks basically went and they said, guys, we have big, large U.S. operations. We can't do this until we get a nod or a wink from the U.S. that they at least recognize that this industry exists from the federal government because that's not even recognized right now. So I do think that almost any safe will allow us to uplist in Canada. That I'm pretty sure, not 100%, but I'm pretty sure about. And I've spent enough time on this to be able to say that. On the U.S. side, I also think it will happen, especially if the Toronto allows it. I think the U.S. is going to move pretty quickly in that direction as well. I have been told by several very large U.S. institutions, banking institutions, that if the U.S. companies trade on the TSX, that they will custody investors if we trade on the TSX. Frankly, it doesn't matter then whether we go to NASDAQ or not, because the amount of demand for these shares will be tremendous. The TSX is a perfectly fine exchange for the large U.S. investors. There's no issues associated with that. I mean, U.S. People like BlackRock and Fidelity and Capital and all these, they buy companies on the Nigerian exchange or the South African exchange or the Russian exchange. For them, the exchange isn't the issue. For them, it's the custody is the issue for them, right? And so if they can get custody at JP Morgan or Bank of America or at Bank of New York, Pershing, then they will buy as long as we're on the TSX. And I've been told by the large institutions that if we're trading on the TSX, they will custody these shares. I think that's, again, they could change their position, but they've been very open in saying that if the MSOs trade on the TSX, they will custody. So I think that's going to be a major, major step in that direction. And then whether the U.S. goes in that direction or not, I personally think it will, because I think there'll be too much pressure for the U.S., particularly from the large banks who want to do business with these MSOs, not to uplist us to the U.S. exchanges. So I think that it'll happen, but I think it all takes a bit of time. And first, we got to focus on getting the legislation, and that's what we're focused on now. I think it happens in the first half of next year. But listen, we could be surprised this year. We could be surprised either in the NBAA or we could be surprised in reconciliation. It could go into either one. I personally think it would be better next year, fully negotiated, and proper, but it could happen this year.
I mean, to be clear, it's when, not if, right? You 100% share that opinion?
Oh, yeah. Listen, the pressure, I've never seen this level of pressure on Washington as there is now. Every constituent group except pharmaceuticals is lobbying for cannabis, and the money's big. Money that's being spent in Washington right now is very big. I can't name it, but one company, a major multinational that I know of, has spent $25 million only in the fourth quarter to lobby this.
I mean, you cannot be a company generating $2.5-3 billion of revenue a few years from now and still on the OTC, right?
I mean, listen, I've seen worse. I mean, Tesla, the giant Chinese tech company, trades on the OTC, but it also trades in China though on a big exchange. So I've seen some crazy things happen in my life, but I would agree with your premise. Yes, I think it would be very strange if that was the case.
I think Tencent's also worth over $100 billion. So yeah,
I know, but it trades on the OTC. It's the most amazing thing, right?
Yeah. Boris, we want to be respectful of your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Boris.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Always happy to do it, and thanks for the invite, Toby. Glad to have done it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.